Your job title says principal engineer, but your code reads like it's allergic to semicolons. That's what the new CTO said to Meyer on his second week, standing in front of a glass wall scribbled with acronyms like ACRS, KPI, and some pyramid labeled Tech Debt Detox. Maya didn't flinch. She just blinked at him, then turned back to her terminal. In her world, production was green. Uptime was 99.997%. Revenue-generating services were humming because her inelegant code, duct-taped together through brutal nights and caffeine tremors, worked. No unit test fetishism, no architecture astronauts, just working code, but Bryce didn't care. Bryce came in dressed like a Patagonia catalog, high on venture capital fumes and low on intellectual humility. Before he arrived, Maya was the ghost in the shell. She skipped town halls, never raised her hand during all hands. Her Slack emoji was just a wrench. But her fingerprints were everywhere. Cron jobs nobody dared touch, middleware that healed broken API chains, data pipelines balanced on hacks so precise they may as well have been surgery. She wasn't glamorous. She was gravity. Bryce didn't believe in gravity. In his onboarding speech, he declared the codebase a swamp of tribal knowledge and announced a velocity-centric rewrite initiative. It was full of buzzy rot like agility-first paradigms and visibility ladders. Half the room nodded. The other half were too stunned to speak. Maya didn't nod. She scrolled through error logs while he talked, fixing a billing bug no one else even knew about yet. First came the Trello boards, then the new Jira rules, then the quiet layoffs. Older devs who knew where the bodies were buried started disappearing, placed by bright-eyed hires with slick GitHub profiles and zero war wounds. They coded fast, but the platform slowed. Latencies crept like mold. No one knew why except Maya, and she knew exactly why. It wasn't the code that was inelegant, it was the understanding. Bryce didn't just dismiss the past, he declared war on it. And Maya, whether she liked it or not, was the past. Her tools were Bash, Go, Rust, and raw Linux daemons. Not because it was trendy, because it was the fastest way to keep the lights on. She wasn't a coder. She was a systems mechanic with dirty hands and a spotless record. And now, the guy who wore loafers with no socks wanted to replace her with dashboards. The cracks started subtly. Bryce's golden hire tried to rewrite the session management service and triggered a memory leak in production. Maya fixed it silently through a backdoor script she never told anyone about. She didn't want praise. She wanted peace. Then came the legacy logic review. Bryce pulled Meyer into a room and projected her repo like it was a crime scene. He circled lines in red. This part has no documentation. This looks like recursion hell. You used C-style comments in 2023? Maya raised her eyes. That line is the reason Stripe hasn't flagged us for duplicate webhook retries in 18 months. Bryce paused, smirked. Doesn't make it elegant. She walked out of the room. After that, she knew what was coming. She started backing things up quietly, her scripts, her notebooks, her license history, not out of paranoia but preparation. She wasn't scared of being fired. She was scared of what would happen after. Bryce continued pruning. Engineers left with Slack emojis still active. The wiki turned into a ghost town. Meanwhile, Bryce strutted around with graphs showing code freshness and team pulse like a doctor showing x-rays to a corpse. And through all of it, Maya kept the heartbeat steady. Her cron jobs purged stale tokens. Her background workers cleaned up orphaned invoices. Her handcrafted async tasks made sure no customer ever saw the chaos inside. But Bryce never asked about outcomes. Just optics. She watched him give a presentation to the board, bragging about how he'd refactored 60% of legacy dependencies in 2 months. What he didn't mention was that nearly all of them still ran through a single thread, the old open-source library that powered the company's backend mesh. A library Bryce praised on LinkedIn in a post titled, Celebrating OSS Heroes. Maya saw it. She didn't like poetry, but the irony tasted sweet. Because what Bryce didn't know, what no one knew, was that the library was hers. She wrote it 5 years ago, maintained it in obscurity, released it under a strict business hostile license, and the company used it a lot. That night, she went home and opened her terminal, typed a single command to trace the current production traffic patterns, and smiled. Every heartbeat in the system ran through her veins, and they had just started cutting her off. The conference room smelled like cold brew and ego. Bryce stood at the head of the glass tomb, wearing his signature startup Jesus outfit, tight slacks, untucked white button-down, and that smug little half-smile he probably practiced in the mirror. He had a MacBook open, projecting a pie chart with the title Engineering Efficiency Index in Comic Sans, like it was an inside joke. It wasn't. "Let's be honest," he said, waving a hand like he was conducting an orchestra of sycophants. "Some of the older devs have been cruising. Legacy thinking slows velocity. Need engineers who ship, not maintain." Maya watched as names flashed across the screen. Dan, the guy who built their original billing module. Gone. Priya, who architected the CI/CD pipeline that kept deploys flowing. Gone. No one said it out loud, but it was a purge. One by one, senior engineers were either performance reviewed into growth opportunities or given severance with a thin HR smile. Then it was Maya's turn. Didn't even bother calling it a review. Her calendar invite read, Q2 Scalability Alignment Discussion. She walked in. Bryce was already seated, flanked by a new HR rep who looked like she'd been hired from LinkedIn the night before. Bryce tapped the spacebar. Her screen lit up with Git commits, Jira ticket stats, and some graph he clearly didn't understand. "Maya, your delivery cadence is stable, but stable isn't scalable. We need elegant, investor-facing architecture. And frankly, a lot of your services, while technically sound, lack modern design." Maya stared at him. What do investor optics have to do with whether or not the scheduler runs at 3:02 a.m. without waking the entire dev team with a PagerDuty alert? Bryce leaned back, steepling his fingers like a budget Bond villain. "It's about narrative. We can't grow if our code base looks like a salvage yard." She didn't blink. That salvage yard handles $12 million a month in revenue events without a single double charge. "That may be," he said, smiling like a man who just read a Medium post on leading with empathy. "But we're shifting toward a proactive future. High velocity, composable first engineering." She didn't argue again, because in that moment, she understood something chilling. Bryce wasn't talking about code. He was talking about control. He clicked to the next slide, highlighting team inspiration. A picture of a GitHub README from an open-source background task library he claimed saved the company thousands in compute costs. It was her library. He didn't even know it. He was standing there, using her own blood-soaked work as a trophy in the meeting where he was trying to bury her. Maya bit her lip so hard it stung. The HR rep handed her a printed growth plan that was little more than a pink slip on layaway. Bryce ended the meeting with, "You're smart, Maya. I'm sure you'll land on your feet, but we have to think about scalability." She walked out, cheeks burning, humiliated, but under the burning ember of embarrassment was something sharper, rage. She didn't cry. She didn't vent. She went home, turned off her phone, and opened the terminal. First, she verified the library's license, her original repo, hosted under an MIT-like shell, but with one key clause. Commercial internal use in a for-profit environment requires explicit written consent and active license registration. Then, she did the deeper dig. She pulled the package registry logs, the company's internal forks, the Docker image layers. Every single one was rooted in her open-source code. They hadn't even changed the default configuration values. Bastards were running prod services with her name still in the comments. She started downloading everything. Not maliciously, methodically. Logs, commit history, integration reports, API keys from decommissioned projects, dependency trees showing exactly how many functions, endpoints, and critical queues still passed through her code. By midnight, she had a folder labeled Compliance Evidence. No announcement, no Slack goodbye, no social media post. Just cold, deliberate documentation. She wasn't going to warn them. She wasn't going to shout. She was going to wait, watch, and let Bryce keep swinging his axe, unaware that the tree he was cutting down was the one holding up the entire fucking forest. The email came at 2:14 p.m. Subject line, "Immediate termination, engineering transition, no greeting, no explanation. Just HR sanitized bullets and a calendar link to process your departure. Slack cut off mid-thread. VPN revoked. GitHub keys dead." She couldn't even pull her own code snippets from the cloud IDE. No one spoke to her, not Bryce, not the PMs, not even the junior devs she mentored through their first flameout deploys. They didn't even have the decency to call it a layoff. It was surgical, silent, Bryce's brand of bloodletting. She stared at her laptop screen for 5 seconds, then 10, then 30. Nothing moved. The chair across from her desk was still warm from the morning stand-up, where she'd explained, for the 4th time, why the new notification system couldn't be decoupled from the legacy auth service without throttling the refresh token rotation. They nodded, said cool, then went back to logging stories about animated buttons. And now she was gone. No thanks. No severance. Just a blank goodbye calendar invite and an HR drone named Callie who said, "Please return any company assets to the lobby desk by 5 p.m. She sat for a moment longer, then stood. By the time she stepped outside, the company Slack was already lit up with Bryce's victory lap, thrilled to announce a major backend refactor initiative designed to reduce code debt and improve investor transparency. Today, we take our next step towards scalable innovation. The post had 4 fire emojis, 2 claps, and somewhere in the comments, someone wrote, "Had to see Maya go. Her legacy will live in the logs forever." Maya didn't even make it to the subway. She ducked into a bodega, bought a Coke, sat on a milk crate behind the dumpster, and just stared at the condensation running down the can. Empty, not sad, not angry, just vacuumed. And then something flickered, not rage, not yet, something cleaner, sharper, focus. She pulled out her phone, searched her own GitHub repo, checked the last download timestamp, 34 minutes ago. That meant someone inside the company had triggered a build after she was fired, using her library, her unlicensed, explicitly commercial use restricted library. She tapped to reread the clause she'd added years ago, long before she knew this company would ever exist. Section 5C. For-profit entities using this software in internal operations must secure a commercial license agreement with the original author. No ambiguity. No loopholes. We're in breach. And she had everything. Every integration logged, every metadata hash, every CI/CD ping timestamped and archived. She hadn't built a library. She'd built a live, pulsing fingerprint tracker embedded into every service they now ran their business on. They didn't just fire her. They fired the foundation. And they did it with zero comprehension of what kept their architecture alive. Bryce didn't realize it, but by cutting her loose, hadn't saved the company money. He just tossed a lit match into a warehouse full of dry paper and gasoline. She finished her Coke, tossed it into the recycling, pulled out her phone again and messaged Talia, her old college roommate, now a partner at a boutique tech IP law firm. "Maya, hey, you still do license enforcement?" Talia, "Only when it's fun." Maya, "Good, I've got a live one. Multi-million-dollar usage. No contract." Talia, "My favorite flavor." Maya stood, feeling the ache return to her limbs. It wasn't adrenaline, it was a quiet kind of fuel. The kind you pour slow and steady before lighting the fuse. She walked home, booted her personal machine, opened a private repo, dropped a zip file labeled revoke trigger. Then she began to write, not code, not scripts, not yet. She started outlining the invoice, itemized, time-tracked, tied to specific services, each charge linked directly to active usage of her licensed product. No anger, no shouting, just math, cold, relentless math. They wanted to save money. She was about to show them what it cost. Talia looked over the license text twice, then a third time. They sat in a downtown cafe with peeling brick walls and overpriced pour-overs, laptops glowing between them like evidence exhibits in a murder trial. Maya didn't speak. She didn't have to. Talia's eyes narrowed to razors as she traced the lines of Maya's custom OSS clause. "Jesus Christ," Talia muttered. "This isn't just a gray area. This is open season liability with receipts." Maya sipped her coffee, black. "I kept the clause buried in the repo's subdirectory for years. No one ever asked." Talia leaned back. They should have. Because the second they ran this in a for-profit environment without written permission, legally parked a tanker truck on your front lawn, and started siphoning oil without paying. She flipped her screen around. "Here, this is your damage calculation baseline. By GitHub's own metrics, they've downloaded updates to the package 26 times in the last 90 days. You've got multiple integration logs with their domain hard-coded. And this function here, internal worker panic recovery, it's still timestamping outbound error reports with your signature hash." Maya nodded. "I told them it was legacy. They thought legacy meant disposable." Talia smirked, then tapped out a few lines in a shared doc. "Invoice licensing violation, commercial internal use company, redacted corp. 1 usage, 88 runtime instances across 14 services rate, $7,500 per instance total, $660,000 additional penalties for non-disclosure, plus $25,000 cease and desist draft attached." She slid it over. "We can send this tomorrow. Hell, I could walk it over in a tuxedo and a brass band if you want. But you've already got them nailed." Maya stared at the screen for a long time. She reached out, closed the lid, and said, "Not yet." Talia blinked. "Why? I want them to feel it," Maya said, calm as a monk on morphine. "Not the invoice, the absence." That night, Maya built a dashboard. Not flashy, just a terminal-fed monitoring page pulling from public uptime pings, status page deltas, and third-party chatter. She scraped Twitter, Reddit, and API discussion boards. Set up keyword alerts for things like auth delay, background job stuck, invoice sync failing. Every time a thread went up about the platform misbehaving, she marked it. When a dev posted a cry for help about flaky login sessions or overnight 502s, she screencapped it. When a user complained their billing data was lagging 3 days behind, she timestamped and added it to the folder. The first hit came 2 days after she was let go. A startup founder tweeted, "Is redacted corp. Down again. Timeout 3 times this week." This new update broke more than it fixed. Maya smiled and logged the link. She noticed the time of the tweet matched almost exactly with when they'd last pulled her OSS package. The next day, another post, noticing weird behaviors with redacted corp. Webhook processor. Anyone else seeing duplicate invoices? She didn't respond. She didn't warn them. She just watched. 1 week later, her GitHub profile showed a spike for 500% increase in download traffic for the library. A single IP showed 18 pulls in a 6-hour window. Maya knew that IP. It belonged to their internal Jenkins box. They were panicking, and they were reaching deep into a system they didn't understand, running builds on code they no longer had the right to touch. Maya opened the invoice again, adjusted the total. $660,000 became $2.5 million. Talia called her the next morning. "You sure you want a hold?" "Yes," Maya replied. "Let them bleed a little first." She wasn't playing for money anymore. She was playing for the echo. The ripple. The moment Bryce would stand in front of the board, hands trembling, pretending everything was under control while the entire infrastructure turned to static behind him. She could already see it, not because she hoped, because she knew. It started with login lag, just a few seconds at first, nothing worth a Sev1 ticket. Then the sync service started choking during peak hours. Emails went out late. Invoices duplicated themselves like rabbits on meth. The junior devs huddled in Slack, muttering about queue poisoning and timing mismatches, which really meant we don't know what the hell we're looking at. Then the status page lied. They'd rigged it for proactive transparency, aka smoke and mirrors. Everything showed green, even as customers were flooding the support inbox with bug-eyed rage. One client emailed, "Our monthly invoices are tripled. My accountant thinks we've been hacked. What the hell is going on?" Inside the company, engineers flailed like cats tossed into a swimming pool. They reopened Maya's old branches, hoping to salvage something usable. But no one understood how the services meshed. New scalable architecture was a Frankenstein of half-baked microservices and repackaged API wrappers duct-taped to buzzword-laden chaos. The scheduler she'd written, the one that smart-throttled cron loads across data centers based on queue lag, was gone. Bryce had called it over-engineered and replaced it with a Zapier chain and 3 Lambda functions that ate memory like a stoned elephant. By Friday, half the product's core features were failing at random. Bryce, of course, blamed everything but himself. AWS latency, misconfigured YAML, a rogue intern. At one point, he even blamed solar flares. His Slack update read, Q3 platform inconsistencies traced to legacy cron fragmentation and outdated Q listeners. Migration was necessary. We will iterate forward. Translation, I broke it. I have no idea how to fix it. Please clap. Aya read the post while eating leftover lo mein on her couch, the lights low, her cat purring like a chainsaw beside her. She didn't laugh, she simmered. Because behind every broken feature, every panicked engineer, every frantic Slack ping was one single truth: they were still using her library. Still pinging her endpoints. Still riding on top of infrastructure they didn't pay for. And it was cracking. The tipping point came on a Tuesday afternoon. She saw the tweet before her notifications even caught up. Our client data at Redacted Corp. Got scrambled. Names and IDs mismatched in export. This is BAD. Was told background jobs failed last night. Anyone else seeing this? Attached was a screenshot of a corrupted export file. The fields were out of order, timestamps missing, user IDs duplicated. I zoomed in on the error code visible in the corner. Job worker 17, on failure panic recovery triggered she didn't have to guess. That function lived deep in her library. One of the legacy background job handlers she'd built to sanitize orphan threads in multi-tenant environments. It only triggered if the task queue collapsed entirely, which meant they'd hit the wall, hard, and they were still running her code, still unlicensed, still blind. She pulled open her dashboard. Traffic was spiking again, massive surges hitting her public GitHub repo. They were trying to trace the issue, praying for answers inside a repo they never paid to understand. Meyer opened her invoice draft and highlighted a line, background task misuse causing client data corruption, plus $400,000 penalty for breach escalation. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just saved the change. Then she opened Twitter and bookmarked the thread, not to retweet, not to dunk, just to have it ready for later, because this wasn't the end. It was only the first crack in the glass, and she knew what came next. When brittle systems fail, they don't bend. They shatter. Bryce called it the clean slate push. He announced it in the Monday stand-up with the swagger of a man who just read a Harvard Business Review article and thought it made him a general. "We're deploying V3.0 tonight," he said, arms crossed, standing under a projector slide that read modernization through momentum. No rollback, full replacement of legacy services. This is how we earn investor trust. Not a single engineer looked him in the eye, because they knew what he didn't. The rewrite wasn't stable. The billing engine barely worked. The new notification queue ran on third-party middleware no one had vetted. And the core async services? Still quietly, desperately relying on Maya's library to keep the machine from grinding to metal. But Bryce was done pretending. He wanted optics. He wanted a headline for the next board meeting. So at 11:54 p.m., with no rollback plan, no sandbox testing, and only a Slack thread of nervous engineers as support, he pushed the full deployment. And the system screamed. Within 6 minutes, 38% of user sessions began failing. By the 10-minute mark, background workers froze. At 15, payment retries started stacking into an infinite loop, auto-charging some accounts multiple times. A client posted in a private forum, "Our users are being triple billed. We need answers now." Internally, it was chaos. The junior devs were crying in Slack. The SREs had locked down the cloud dashboard and were manually trying to kill runaway pods. The new architecture's logging layer hadn't even been finished. There was no telemetry, just fire. At 12:33 a.m., one of the older engineers, the last Maya hire who hadn't yet jumped ship, made a choice. He reverted to the last stable branch, the one with Maya's library. He didn't tell Bryce. He didn't ask permission. He just SSH'd into the build system and kicked off a redeploy. No Slack notification. No Jira ticket. Just a commit note. Hotfix/revert to functional, and in that moment, Maya felt it. Sitting in her apartment, headphones on, watching old Columbo reruns, she caught the ping. Her GitHub webhook burst to life. Requests, plus 247% top IP, internal redacted corpnet referrer, Jenkins v2.325 CI triggered, hotfix/revert to functional. She froze. They were pulling her code, again, after termination, after revocation. After multiple internal memos warning about modernization, Meyer opened the CI logs. There it was, version 1.4.2 of her library, pulled and embedded into their new containers. Not even through a proxy, direct from her public repo, with her watermark still intact. She stared at the logs, watched as their usage ticked up. Over 1,000 function calls an hour, auth services, queue processing, invoice rebalancing. Her code didn't just keep the engine running, it was the engine. They had no license, no right, no clue, and now, no plausible deniability. She reached over to her legal folder, opened the invoice, and clicked duplicate. New line item added, post-termination usage of proprietary OSS library, $1.1 million, Q2 estimate, tiered retroactive rates applied. Attached to it, a timestamped GitHub webhook log, the full IP trace, and CI job references proving internal integration after employment termination. Legally bulletproof, Maya closed her laptop. She didn't need to celebrate. The scoreboard was doing that for her. They could try patching, blaming, rewriting all they wanted, but in the end, they were leaning on the very foundation they tried to erase. And that foundation had a fuse wired straight to her hand. The invoice went out at 9:01 a.m. on a Wednesday. She scheduled the send, clicked the button, then sat back and watched it disappear like a torpedo gliding under the surface, silent, deadly, pre-guided by months of precision. Subject: Commercial license, breach invoice, and notice of pending disclosure body. Dear Legal Counsel, Redacted Corp. Please find attached an itemized invoice for the unauthorized commercial use of the mlib open source software across your internal systems, as well as a breakdown of post-termination usage, which constitutes a violation of Section 5(c) of the published license agreement. Usage has been monitored continuously and corroborated by access logs, public GitHub metrics, internal commit references, and CI/CD job artifacts. All data has been independently verified. Attached is itemized usage report, version, service, runtime hours, retroactive licensing rate sheet summary of breach timeline evidence folder index cease and desist draft with 72-hour embargo. The total amount due for Q1 Q2 licensing, $2,514,000 USD. If no response is received within 72 hours, I will proceed with public disclosure of license violations, including publication to GitHub, LinkedIn, relevant developer legal forums. Respectfully, Maya Tran. She'd attached the invoice as a clean PDF. No bold fonts, no passive-aggressive highlights. Just numbers, cold, verifiable numbers. 34 production services tagged, 2,711 total runtime hours. Version references logged against build IDs. Her watermark hash present in every compiled binary. The cease and desist letter was tucked into a separate attachment, professionally written by Talia and addressed not to Bryce, but to the General Counsel of Redacted Corp. The language was surgical, no threats, just statements of fact. Every violation mapped, every clause quoted. She didn't CC Bryce, didn't BCC the board, just straight to legal. The kind of move that skipped every ladder climber in the middle and landed on the one person who knew exactly what that invoice meant. Then she sat back, waited. By 9:23, her GitHub webhook lit up again. They were pulling her library. Again, she almost laughed. By 10:02, a message appeared in her inbox. From Bryce Collins, subject, license breach notice message. Let's talk, that was it. No apology, no denial. No counter, just a pathetic string of corporate desperation typed from some sunlit corner office where the AC was probably broken because the climate controls still relied on a service she wrote in 2021. Maya didn't hesitate. She hovered over the message for a moment, then clicked delete. Not archive, not flag, delete, because they weren't going to talk. They were going to pay or they were going to burn. She opened her phone, tapped into her notes app, wrote one word, Friday. That was the 72-hour mark. That was when the silence would end. Her lawyer was on standby. GitHub README update queued. LinkedIn post drafted. And if they didn't wire the full amount by the deadline, she'd let the entire tech world know that the same company bragging about open innovation had built their empire on stolen bones. And their CTO, he was about to find out what elegance looked like when it hit back. Boardroom smelled like lemon-scented panic. They called it an emergency strategy sync. But the panic was written all over the invite, flagged red, all caps, mandatory urgent IP action items. Nobody even pretended to sip coffee. Legal was already there when Bryce arrived, 2 laptops open, a stack of printed logs fanned out like a prosecutor's exhibit pile. The CFO spoke first, received a commercial licensing invoice this morning from a former employee. $2.5 million, backdated, accompanied by a cease and desist. Why weren't we informed of this risk? Bryce, dressed for defense in a tieless blazer, tried to play it cool. We did a full architecture revamp. The code in question wasn't proprietary, it was OSS. She didn't build it for the company. Legal cut in, voice sharp as a gavel. She didn't have to. Open source license includes an internal use clause. It's been legally valid since 2018. And we've confirmed the company's systems have been in breach for at least 14 months, including post-termination usage. The CTO's smirk faltered. The General Counsel tapped a folder. We pulled our own commit history. Jenkins logs, Docker containers, and CI references all trace back to her repo. We've got active systems running her code as of this morning. Board member leaned forward, eyes like bullets. Did you know her software required a commercial license? Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence hung like a noose. Did you, the CFO repeated, or did you not know? Bryce tried to pivot. It was an oversight. Our legal team never flagged. The HR lead interrupted, voice trembling. She was terminated without severance. No IP agreement was filed during offboarding. Laptop was deactivated before the standard compliance check. There's no paper trail of consent for continued use of her assets. The room dropped to a hush. Then legal added, almost as an afterthought, also, her attorney is very real, very loud, and has already hinted they're prepared to publish a licensing breach summary to public developer channels by Friday. The CFO leaned back, rubbing her temple. What you're telling us is we not only fired the person who kept our infrastructure breathing, but we also built our post-layoff services on top of her software without permission, and she is proof, legal, down to the function call. Someone in the room whispered, "We're fucked." Bryce tried one last Hail Mary. "We can negotiate, settle it down, offer equity or a smaller payout." No, legal snapped. She's not bluffing. She knows exactly what she's doing. She itemized runtime hours. We've already seen chatter online. If this leaks, we're a tech pariah. No trust, no customers, and then came the final gut punch. That afternoon, Maya's phone lit up with a message from a friend at another SaaS firm. Screenshot attached. A new landing page. Competitor name now proudly powered by MLib trademark. We do it right. Licensed. Secure. Scalable. Maya stared at it for a moment, then slowly exhaled through her nose. Hadn't said a word publicly. No interviews, no blog posts, no tweets. She let the silence do the damage. But someone else, someone smart, had seen the storm brewing and decided to ride the wave. They'd reached out weeks ago, actually. Back when she quietly added a contact for enterprise licensing line to her repo's README. No PR, no announcement. Just a door left open for people who knew how to knock. And now, the first one had walked through. Meanwhile, Bryce was in a corner office losing control of his voice, his narrative, and his throne, drowning in a boardroom that smelled less like lemon and more like blood. Maya, meanwhile, didn't move. She watched it all unfold in silence. Vindicated, focused, still holding the trigger. And Friday hadn't even come yet. They pushed Bryce out on a Thursday. No announcement, no goodbye post, no press release full of lies about new adventures. Just a line buried at the bottom of a board memo. Effective immediately, Bryce Collins will be stepping away from day-to-day operations to pursue other opportunities. Translation: we gave him the rope, and he tied the knot himself. He left behind a data center running on duct tape, broken morale, and a $2.5 million invoice shaped like a guillotine. HR offered him a golden parachute in exchange for an NDA. He took it. He always took the deal. That's what guys like Bryce do. They trade damage for silence and call it strategy. But Maya wasn't Bryce. When legal reached back out, palms sweating through polite phrases like amicable resolution and mutual off-ramping, dangled a $750K hush payout and a confidentiality clause so thick it came with its own table of contents. She didn't even open the PDF. Her reply was a single sentence. The full invoice will be honored, or the cease and desist goes public. They paid in full. Wire confirmation arrived Friday morning. She sat on her balcony when it came through, watching the city stir awake. No champagne, no dramatic tears. Just coffee, a fresh notepad, and the calm weight of justice delivered on her own terms. By noon, her GitHub inbox was full. Developers asking about the license, startups inquiring about partnerships, one recruiter from a big tech name trying to play it cool with, "We loved your approach to IP clarity." Any interest in discussing staff roles, but it was the DM from a 3-time founder that caught her eye. The guy had been early at one unicorn, burned out at a second, now bootstrapping something raw but promising. DM, "Hey, we're using MLib, fully licensed. Watching how you handled all this, masterclass. We're building something ambitious. No VC parasites, just product. Want to come build it with us?" She didn't respond right away. She let the message sit while she took a walk. No destination, just motion. For the first time in years, she wasn't holding a code base together with her own sanity. Wasn't fighting to be heard in a room of people who only knew how to talk. She was choosing. The next morning, she walked into a co-working space in the East Side. Big windows, air that didn't smell like ozone and existential dread. Someone had scrawled "Welcome Maya" in dry erase across the whiteboard above a simple desk. There was no assigned seating, just a contract printed on thick paper, a good pen, and a line at the bottom that said CTO. She picked up the pen. As the ink dried, her phone buzzed with a final ping. A push notification from the same company that fired her, stripped her access, and built their empire on her backbone. Redacted Corp. will be undergoing scheduled maintenance this weekend to improve service stability. Translation: the patch failed, the damage stuck. The ghosts are still in the pipes. Maya smiled, not with spite, with peace, because now the library was hers again. Her name was on it. Her rules powered it. Her future stretched out ahead, clean as a new repo. And no one would ever steal her code without consequence again. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.